Hi people, and hello my Chili Con Carnage crew, it's the man image design for my eyes, Chili here, doing a 5-minute review on the Cure's newest album, Songs of a Lost World. I can say without a doubt that I am not the biggest fan of the Cure, but they have a lot of amazing songs that are exemplified on their greatest hits album, and I must admit that I have a very odd fascination to their near 30-minute track, music from the film soundtrack Carnage Visors. So let's take a look at their newest album and first in 16 years, and I'll let you in on why I think this is going to be the Cure's last album. The Cure is certainly a unique band that seemed to symbolise the 80s goth rock movement and certainly influenced many musicians for decades to come. The band's origins trace back to 1976 when they first formed and has undergone several lineup changes over its near 50-year existence, and Robert Smith remains the only constant member throughout this duration. The band's ability to create surreal sounding soundscapes has not eluded them over the last few years, as the album certainly does manage to live up to the skill set found on previous records within the first track on the album, which contains some very mesmerizing bass lines. In fact, it's sometimes easy to be lost in a level of transcendence to what I am hearing that I forgot about Robert until his lines are brought to our attention with the ominous lyrics, "This is the end of every song that we sing." The macabre beauty of this song is retained with Robert Smith's pensive vocal delivery and lyricism, which serves as a stark contrast to the symphonic sections heard on this song, and I must admit, I was pleasantly surprised about the quality of his vocals found on hand. Now, it's no secret the reoccurring themes and motifs that can be found on this record, which the second track, and Nothing Is Forever, fully embraces this theme and feels more like a continuation of that earlier tune. One of the more curious aspects about this record is the album's artwork, which simultaneously shows a statue that is both unfinished and requires more work to be done, but yet there is also the finished component which is very weathered and worn down, symbolising perhaps the viewpoint of Robert Smith and his works mentioned earlier, and I gotta say that I really dig this artwork. Now, if you were sick of the apathy and negative lyrics found so far, then you must not know who the hell this band is. But I think it's worthy to point out that the first 14 minutes of this record are spent around Robert Smith and how time is finite, and of course Robert knows what time he has left is rather fleeting. In fact, it is by the third track that we find ourselves on a detour from this narrative for the first time, and by the fourth track, I can prominently hear a guitar for the first time as well. I'm sure it was used earlier on in the album, but admittedly the bass lines and synth sections have been at the musical forefront so far, which is an interesting aspect. By the time we reach the midway point of this album on the track Drone No Drone, we are met with a more industrial sounding effort, and I am reminded of the song Drone Carrying Dread by Author and Punisher, not only because of the link in the song's titles, but its musical elements too. Now that would be an interesting crossover between those two musicians. Thumbs up if you want to see that. Of course, as mentioned before, all of this has been a detour as we return to our common viewing on the song I Can Never Say Goodbye, which is a deep tune written about the death of Robert Smith's brother 2 years prior, which undoubtedly brought a grounded reality to the singer about death and its certainty, as can be read of course by the lyrics, "Something wicked this way comes," taken from the Shakespeare play of Macbeth, and this is a phrase that is used to express impending doom or something ominous. And finally, we arrive at the last track, End Song. And this is quite an epic piece with a 10-minute runtime and gives off an air of forlorn with the music on here. It should be interesting to note that this tune was inspired by an evening Robert Smith shared with his father back in 1969, in particular on the 20th of July. Now, if that date seems very specific to you and you weren't aware of its historical importance, then you weren't listening in school, because this was the date when the Apollo 11 mission landed on the moon, and Robert has stated he and his dad spent that evening stargazing and taking that moment in like many most likely did on that night, just fully absorbing this for the rest of his life, to the point that it serves as the final moments on this record, as Robert mentions how he wonders how he got so old, a feeling I'm sure that many long-term fans of his music can relate to. It certainly feels like it ventures into space rock territory here with its sparse and somewhat waltzing pace on hand. That to me at least made me see the bigger picture on hand, which is we are merely small creatures floating on a rock in a vast empty field of space. Pure beauty, one hell of a way to close out the album. As I mentioned at the beginning of this review, I said that this will most likely be the Cure's last album, and I believe this due to the fact that it has been 16 years between releases, but also given the lyrical departure to previous efforts and reoccurring themes of mortality and the fragility of our lives, then I believe that this will be the Cure's swan song, and no records will be released released during their lifetime. I certainly don't want this to be true, but I think that we have to look at the facts at the end of the day and realise that Robert Smith is now approaching his 70s and can't keep this up for his entire life. Not to mention, of course, the toll on his body that the battle he had with Barbra Streisand would have taken. All jokes aside though, I hope that this record doesn't become his black star moment. But if this was the case, then this album certainly sees the band being bowed out on an extreme high. One that has made me want to actually revisit their prior records in full and perhaps even turn me into a fan of their music. Overall, I'll be giving this record a score of 9.5 million chilies on the spicy scale, with my favourite tracks being Alone, War Song and End Song. Despite all this time away from the recording studios, Robert shows us that he hasn't lost his ability to write music, and this will undoubtedly go down as one of the best records of the year. So keep an eye out for it at the end of the year mentions for my favourite albums of 2024. But for now, I want to hear your thoughts, people. Comment below and tell me what your favourite track was off this record. If you've enjoyed this content, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to us and stay notified for future music related content, because it keeps our manager happy at the end of the day. We are also on Discord, Instagram, Facebook and all those other social platforms if you want to check us out. As always, people, you have a great day and stay spicy.